gremlins! I'm trying a new audio recording setup this week, so hopefully this works. As I continued to make spooky, scary, or otherwise seasonal videos throughout October, I found an old piece of art that fits the theme. This picture of a villainous-looking woman lounging in a throne, surrounded by skulls and green fire. Today I'm going to redraw this art piece and improve it. Speaking of Halloween, I still have Halloween shirts for sale on my Etsy, linked in my description. Each shirt is completely unique and hand-painted, and you can watch the process of making them all in 3 videos I posted a few weeks ago. Unlike other redraws I've done on this channel, this original art piece isn't too different to the style I draw in now. The main things I'm changing are the pose and the look of the throne itself. I didn't record the process of sketching my body because I used myself as a reference for this pose. I'm usually okay at drawing people, although I definitely need to learn more about anatomy and figure drawing, but for this complicated position that involves a lot of angles as well as crossed legs, I wanted to be sure I was doing it right. The original throne was boring. I didn't really know how to draw environments or fancy furniture, so the throne is just a blocky stone monstrosity with some spikes at the top and a skull as decoration. In the redraw, I used reference images of fantasy thrones to design a more elegant chair. The seat itself is cushioned, there are still spikes but they are more detailed, and there are carved vines of thorns twisting around the arms and back of the chair. I'm really quite proud of this design. After detailing the sketch, I flipped it to make sure the throne was symmetrical, then added the green flame torches on either side. The lighting in this image is going to be quite complicated. In the original image, the villain, who I never named, is lounging on the throne in a very casual way, one leg over the arm of her seat, propped up on her elbow with a goblet in her free hand. The point was for her to look casually evil, like she has to put no effort into her villainy, but actually it just means she looks juvenile and unintimidating. When taking reference photos, I tried a lot of poses, both copying the original pose and thinking of new ones that convey the body language I wanted. In the end, I landed on a pose where this evil lady is sitting with her legs crossed, one hand on her head in a pose that looks slightly disinterested, and the other hand resting on the armrest. Her head is tipped up, looking down at the viewer in indifference, or perhaps disdain. While I completely changed the villain's pose, I kept her outfit nearly the same. If I were designing a villain today, I would not dress her this way. However, I kind of like the edgy teenager style I gave her when I first drew this 2 or 3 years ago. She has thigh-high heeled boots, a low-cut shirt under a jacket with spikes on the shoulders, and half-shaved hair. I'm pretty sure my main design inspiration was the various elements of villain kid fashions in the Descendants movie music videos, since I was rather obsessed with the soundtracks of all 3 movies at the time, and thought the costumes were so cool. I finished my sketch by roughly mapping out where the green cast light of the torches would fall, then I began my line art. My line art has definitely improved since I first drew this character, since I now use a more interesting brush than the default round one, and I also use a lot of varying line weights, which I didn't start doing until this year. I put a lot of details into the line art, a lot of which will be later lost when I start adding high contrast shadows. As far as I remember, there isn't much backstory to my original villain drawing. She wasn't an OC I created and didn't have any kind of story connected to her. She was just a cool looking subject for an interesting drawing idea I had during summer break one year, which I was really proud of at the time. However, now that I'm revisiting this artwork, I'll come up with some more information about this woman. I'm drawing on various imaginary games I used to play with friends which involved an evil ruler and a rebellion, to decide that this young evil empress is a usurper who stole the throne of her brother, or perhaps uncle, using poison and spies within the palace. I don't exactly know the setting. She's dressed quite modern, but the green flames imply magic and fantasy, as does the existence of a powerful ruling monarchy. Maybe this is a fantasy world that has the same technological advancement as our world, like that of Nimona. Maybe this particular queen is just very progressive when it comes to her fashion choices. Anyway, this evil empress took over the kingdom and is a strict ruler, controlling her subjects through money and fear. She has filled the palace with henchmen loyal to her. Her brother, the former king, is dead, as is most of his family, but one true heir remains, the evil empress's young niece, who is being hidden and raised by a rebellion on the outskirts of the kingdom. Much of this queen's resources are going into trying to find the young princess and either kill her or bring her to the palace to be taught the ways of dark magic and evil. It's not like the queen wants to go through all the trouble of creating a different heir. The Empress has remade the kingdom's palace with dark stone and green flames in the torches. She's expanded the dungeons and revels in torturing rebels her henchmen catch. The kingdom is falling into decay because of her use of dark magic, which is slowly killing the earth, but she isn't feeling any strain from the famines like her subjects are. In this image, she's presiding on her throne, listening to reports from her servants, and disappointed by the lack of news. Perhaps she will be merciful and send these disappointments away, or perhaps they could do with some encouragement to do better, provided by a few weeks in the dungeon. In the original image, the green fire has almost no effect on the rest of the colours of the image, besides some reflections on the spikes on the throne. This won't be the case for my redraw. I've decided that the green flames are the only source of light in this image, so the whole image will be shades of green, grey, and black. I started by just colouring everything in the image in grayscale, going back and adding green light later. Most of this image is very dark. Her clothing is black, her hair dark, and the only pale colours are her skin and the silver spikes on her clothing. This will hopefully draw attention to the face and hands. The background is also dark, except for the torches, which I detail last. On the throne, I coloured the details of the thorny vines first, before colouring the main wood of the chair. The vines are 3D details carved in relief, rather than inset carvings. I used to draw in all grayscale a lot when I was first getting into digital painting and using Photoshop as my digital art medium rather than Adobe Illustrator. When I was trying to draw more realistic, grayscale was easier to shade than using colours. Drawing in all grayscale again brings me back, even if the style I'm using is completely different. I began to add green when I was shading the metal. Where I would normally put nearly white highlights, the highlights on the silver are the most intense shade of neon green. When the jewellery had green highlights and near black shadows, I moved on to the hair. I added the shadows first, then a few highlights of green on either side of the hair. I'm really proud of how the hair turned out. When those details had been added, I began to work on the shadows of the rest of the image. I almost never shade with pure black, that almost never works well, but in this case, the shadows are as dark as they can be. I started with the face, the part of the image I was most worried about shading, and completely detailed it before moving downward. I once again relied on reference images to draw the lighting, especially around the face, which has quite complicated light and shadows. I got help holding a phone with a flashlight on either side of me while sitting in the same pose as the character, in an otherwise dark room, then used that photograph to rough in where the shadows and light fell on my face, shoulders, and arms. The edges of the face, the cheek and brow bone, are the most highlighted, while the chin, eyelids, and center of the face are in shadow. Throughout the process of shading the face, I had to trust the process, since it felt like it was very suddenly out of control and not working the way I wanted. After getting the face to look the way I wanted, the rest of the shadows were pretty easy. The arms are mostly lit by one torch each, since the light isn't very strong, and so the shadows don't interact that much. Moving on from the shadows, I began to draw the light. I created 2 layers of green light, one for each torch, and started by drawing in all the light cast by the left torch. This time I drew in all the light before blending any of it out. With the shadows already in place, I had an idea of where the light needed to go. The light didn't take long, and then I moved on to the second layer of green, this cast by the right torch. At this point, I'm really happy with how the image is coming together. All I have left to do is shade and highlight the background. I started with the cushion, focusing on drawing cast shadows from the arms and body in both directions. I also added a tiny amount of green highlight to the top of the chair, where the cushion would come out from the wood. Speaking of that wood, I added shadows to the wood as well, especially where it would be cast by vine details. Those vines are the details that took the longest to shade in the background, adding green highlights to each thorn and vine stem, facing the nearest torch. Rather than individually blending each vine as well, I just applied a blur effect, which works fine for this. The final touches of the background were adding highlights and shadows to the throne spikes and the torch holders. I added cast shadows on the floor going both directions again, and a vignette around the whole image to make the center the focus. Here is the original image I drew in 2022 when I was 17, and here is my redrawn art. I hope you enjoyed watching this process. I had a lot of fun with this image. It's so dramatic and high contrast. There's one more Halloween-themed video to look forward to, so until then, bye!